BOM colleges, the Banyan Academy of the BOM College, and today's meeting is coordinated by Madras School of Social Work, BOM College, TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and Bharati Dasan University, and Nirman Mazdur Panchayat Sangam, as well as a Fairwear Foundation. So I welcome you all on behalf of HRF once again for this wonderful session. Over to moderators, Mr. Prerna Sriram. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Soumya, and Prerna and I will be your moderators for this afternoon. Our first speaker today is Suhasini Singh. She has been working with Fairwear Foundation since 2013. As a country manager for India, she oversees Fairwear's work and stakeholder engagement in India. Prior to Fairwear, she was working as program director at CIVIDEP, which is a labor rights organization based in Bangalore, India. Since 2007, she has focused her work on labor rights issues in supply chain garment industry in particular, primarily concerned with the working and living conditions of women workers in global supply chain. Her work interests are wages, business, and human rights and gender. She is the author of a number of articles and research reports on the issues of working conditions for garment workers and corporate accountability in the supply chain. We welcome you, Suhasini.
Thank you, Soumya. And good afternoon, everyone. I'll not introduce myself again, but I would want to give a brief introduction about the organization that I come from, which is Fairwear Foundation. Fairwear Foundation is a Dutch organization. It is a multi-stakeholder initiative, meaning that clothing brands become our member by paying an annual fee. We also have unions and trade unions and NGOs on our board. And any work that we undertake, there is a full consensus among the board, and the board comprises of 50% of business representatives and 50% of union and NGO representatives. So any work that we undertake is with 100% consensus, with full consensus from the board. So the idea is also that no one party dominates over the work that we take. So business should not dominate on or have a say on what Fairwear does. Neither does the NGO and the trade unions have authority over the business to direct our work. Fairwear is largely funded by the Dutch government. We do have some smaller funds from other organizations, largely intergovernmental funds, or other country like German government gives us funds as well. Our work, as the name suggests, Fairwear, we are primarily in the garment sector. We work in the garment sector, and over 130 clothing brands are our member. And these brands are all European. So we here living in India, we would not be familiar with these brand names because they are largely mid to smaller brands, not the likes of H&M or Gap or Zara, which are the very prominent global clothing brands. So they are not a member, but others who are normally medium-sized to small-sized brands, which are popular within Europe. What Fairwear what we do as Fairwear is verify their supply chain. We look at the social standards in the supply chain, and social standards is largely pertaining to the labor conditions, whether their entitles their rights are met or not, their payments allow a dignified living and stuff. And these verification are based on the 8 principles of labor standards by the ILO, International Labour Organization. We also do a lot of training to the factories and business associations. We also run a complaint helpline. Fairwear is active in 11 countries in the global south. And as I said, headquartered in Amsterdam in Netherlands. That is about Fairwear. The industry, I mean, in the introduction, you heard from Soumya. I have been working in the garment industry since 2007. So I have a fair knowledge of the industry and also the intricacies of the industry and industry practices. The garment industry, and I would also like to make a difference between the garment industry and the textile and garment industry. So textile and garment is everything from the process of making textile like fabric to garment which is cut, made, and trimmed, and finally it is ready to wear. That is the garment. So the entire industry is called textile and garment industry. And while I have focused mostly on the garment industry, so where the product is ready to wear, and where the fabrics are cut and made into garments and exported. The garment industry. Is there some interruption?
No, you can continue. Sorry. Yeah, please.
So the industry employs 35 million workers in India alone. Garment industry contributes to 3% to the GDP, and 13 to 14% to the foreign exchange earning, because a lot of production happens here and we export it to largely to Europe and US, and some bit to the Middle East. So it is quite significant. The industry is quite significant for our economy because of employment and also because of the foreign exchange earning, which is 13 to 14% is a significant amount. When we look at the men is to women ratio in the industry, it is 30 to 70. So obviously 70% of women at the workforce level. I'm not talking about the managerial or supervisory level ratio. So it's largely women dominant, and the garment industry in India is divided in 3 hubs. So there are 3 production hubs. One is Delhi NCR. So Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida, they have most of these factories making garments. The second is Bangalore, and third is Tirupur in Tamil Nadu. And each one comes with its own characteristics. They are not a homogeneous factory or homogeneous hubs. And each of these hubs specialize in their own, specialize in certain kind of product that they make. If someone is interested, you can drop a question later or can connect with me offline as well. Yeah, so this is about the industry that, I mean, I wanted to share it with you because what I'm going to talk now is the reference point will be the industry. And violence against women and labor, my experience will, I mean, most of it will come from what I've worked and seen and read and written everything around it. Right, so violence, I mean, there are 2 types, there are 2, not types, I would say 2 reasons why violence takes place. One is structural or systemic, which it's not just one person's doing that there's a violence, but it has been ingrained and it's structural. There's a system to support such a violence. And the second one is interpersonal, and it can be a feud between any 2 individuals, be it men, women, man to man, man to women, women to women, etc. And gender-based violence is largely, or I would also go on to say it's because it is structural, there's structural flaw in the way society is governed or ruled, and yeah, and because it is systemic, it's also it's that all the more difficult to address it just by one training or a few research reports or stuff. So it has to the effort to address violence against women has to be again at that level of systems and structures and state supporting all these efforts to address violence. There's also while the state we look up to the state. When I say state, I mean the government. While we look up to the state to support any effort to thwart or to address violence against women, it also in some ways perpetuates violence in the society and in the industry everywhere. And the funny part is that they do it unknowingly too. Now, just to give you an example, since many of you are students, I'm told, in the audience, I'll give you two examples, not from the industry, but elsewhere, which I've personally observed and which made me think that, if this is what state is doing, then, think about individuals and mindset of people. So one is about, the advertisement of LIC. LIC is the state-run insurance company, I'm based in Bangalore. I saw a big hoarding from LIC which had a picture of a girl in a bridal getup, all decked up, and then the hoarding said, if you have a girl or if you have a daughter, start saving now. And this is anyway, the time doesn't matter, but this was a big hoarding in a very prominent place in a roundabout in Bangalore. And while on the face of it, if you see the ad, it's about you have to start saving now and think about future. Start thinking about future from now onwards. But if you delve deeply into it, it also means that you have a daughter or you have a girl in your house, and you have at one point you have to marry her off because there's a picture of a bridal girl in fully dressed, ready to be ready to go to get married. The first thing that comes to your mind is you have to get her married and you have to pay a hefty amount during this whole marriage ceremony. So you start saving now. So this is also in a way perpetuating that girls are burdensome to the family. And therefore you have to think now, don't wait for, few years before the marriage or few months before the marriage that you can pull it off. So you start right now at whatever age the girl is. So this is one way of, and I'm sure when they were making the hoarding or the ad was conceived, this didn't come to their mind. So everyone who sees the hoarding is the back home. The first thought is, okay, I have a daughter. Maybe am I saving enough? Am I not? And should I do more saving? These are the things that would come to your mind without. And this is also a way which perpetuates violence, and it comes in, and the manifestation is quite different. And that is also that you see about feticides or abandoned girls and stuff. I don't have to share the details of it, but this is a way to perpetuate violence. The second one is not exactly example of violence, but how women do not form a part, or they do not, the state do not think of women or special needs of women in their planning process. And this is a case from the Delhi Metro. Delhi Metro, when it was being laid, it's a fantastic network and local communication channel for Delhi NCR. What I've read, and I've also seen, I've stayed in Delhi for 4 years. So when in the whole planning process and in the initial phase of the metro being built, there was no idea or there was no planning to make toilets in the stations, in the metro stations. It was only an afterthought that these toilets were made. Now, without being offensive to the men or to the boys listening to me, while men can take the liberty to relieve themselves anywhere, they think the world is a toilet for them. Excuse my word, but they can relieve anywhere outside, but women do need some private space to relieve themselves. And this whole idea wasn't even conceived that there should be that people, when they come to use the metro station, some may need to use the toilet, and you have to construct these facilities within the premises, within the stations. So it was only an afterthought, and after I think good 4 to 5 years of metro being functional, then these toilets were built. So the point I'm trying to make is, even at the state level, where these big thinkers and researchers and planners and architects, or in this particular case, everyone is involved, but women somehow do not, or the needs of women do not come in their purview of planning. And it is so ingrained that I mean, I'm sure they would not have done it knowingly, but it somehow comes in. So the idea is that every time you see something missing out or not there for women, one has to raise questions or demand for it. Coming to the industry, I'm sorry if I took long in sharing the two stories, but I thought it was very interesting to also see how the state, knowingly or unknowingly, they perpetuate violence as well. And violence doesn't always mean hitting or abusing, or you can also discriminate and just be fine. I mean, discriminate women against men and carry on with usual work. Coming to the industry setup in the garment industry, as I told you, the ratio of or the percentage of women are much more. It's 70% women on the shop floor with 30% men. There is a very very meticulous way of recruitment of women in the industry. The industry prefers to hire women at the work as workers. One, because they're docile and they listen to orders. They do not question. They are, how is it? And the other reason given is that they have nimble fingers, so they can be, and it's very easy for them to work with the garments and do embroidery and stuff like that. But that apart, the skill apart, there's very selective, a very meticulous way of recruiting women at worker level. And while the recruitment is done, which is, I think, in a way, it is good that they give employment opportunity for all the women, and they also do not demand any threshold level of education or skill when they hire. So it's for someone who is coming from village, with very little education. It's a great opportunity that they get in the garment industry to come and earn a living. Now, what happens after that is, while women are working in the industry, they do not get any opportunity to learn and grow within the industry. So there's no, women cannot, or they do not or cannot think of a career development in the same industry. So there's no opportunity to groom or train or learn on the job. So a woman who joins as a worker remains a worker and a senior worker till the end of her career. While if a man joins as a worker, he soon, in a couple of years, he'll be promoted to supervisor and then floor in charge. And they have the opportunity, and they're also groomed in such a way. One of the argument given is that women do not want to take up supervisory positions, and therefore, they remain a worker all their lives, which is not the case, because I mean, it is true that women have dual responsibility, that one working at home, taking care of children and stuff, and then coming to the factory and doing an 8-hour job or even more. Sometimes when there's overtime, there's more work. But they are never asked whether, or they are never picked by the management, those who show the potential to become or to grow in the industry. So there's never a thought given to groom workers from the shop floor. There's also in Tirupur, especially Tirupur is known for its hosiery or t-shirt production. There's a selective recruitment of young girls in the spinning mills. And these young girls are from 14 to 18, 19 years. From 14 years to 19 years, in that age bracket. And they live in hostels, have to work round the clock. They work in shifts rather, and live in hostels in the factory. These workers are again they are hired with a promise of paying a lump sum amount at the end of 3 years contract. And this lump sum, well, it was called, most of you are from Tamil Nadu, you would know it is, if you are familiar with this term, Sumangli, the scheme was called Sumangli scheme. So this lump sum amount could be used by the girl or the girl's parents to marry her off. So that was the whole recruitment practice. And while it was a scheme, a recruitment scheme by the industry, the state very well knew about it. And it became very infamous because of its practices. And while even if the state knew about it, there was no action or no objection to such a scheme. So the state was very much in connivance with the industry in this whole practice, in this whole recruitment practice. Again, you see the role of the state in how it perpetuates violence or supports violence. And these girls, these young girls in Tirupur, this case is specific to Tirupur, I would say. And now also we see some trend in Bangalore. These girls are again not given, according to the law, if a young worker is hired, there should be a provision for them to do study or vocational training after the job is after the working hours. But there's no such thing for these workers, young girls who are hired in the spinning mills. So this is again the industry practice, which is very selective. And why women and girls? Because they would also not make an attempt to organize and make a joint front against the management and demanding something. So women are, so this whole how is it, brain or the whole planning, methodical planning to see that there's no organizing effort in the industry if we hire women or girls. The usual examples of violence against women, like rape or eve teasing or comments with sexual undertones, molestation, these are very regular practices in the industry. Quid pro quo, again, when supervisors demanding for sexual favors if they sanction a leave, or with the promise to increase her salary from next year or next month or whatever. So there's a quid pro quo relationship as well. There's also which is a very complicated case we have heard in the industry of this particular case is from Bangalore, where a supervisor or floor manager is very affectionate to one particular worker, a women worker on the shop floor, and the relationship between them is a mutual consent. So the woman is also consensual to the relationship. It becomes a problem only when the point of affection shifts from this woman to the other woman in couple of months. And the first worker sees it as a pattern. So it's after 4 months is another woman, yet another, after couple of more months, the third woman. So while why I'm saying it's complex, because when the supervisor or the floor manager was in relationship with this woman, it was consensual. But it becomes a point of harassment if it is a pattern that the manager is into. So for a few months, one girl or one woman, and for next few months, another woman. So it becomes complex to deal for us, even if it comes as a complaint, because at that point it was consensual, but later it is not. And so, yeah, we have to be very tactical in dealing such cases. So I would not go in detail into these very specific cases. However, I would want to mention that in the industry, there are several sites of harassment. So one is, of course, on the shop floor. The second is off-site, which is either en route. Often the factory management sends buses to ply them to the factory, and in the evening send them back. So in the buses, normally when workers are asked to stay back to do overtime work late in the evening, and then they are dropped, or during the overtime hours also, there are only few workers in the shop floor, and then such untoward incidences happen on the shop floor. We have also heard of case of a supervisor. Not heard of a case. We got a complaint where a young girl was being dropped after doing her overtime hours. OT is overtime hours. And on the way, the supervisor tried to kiss the girl, and the girl made a complaint. overnight, this girl was taken back to Kerala. She was from Kerala, and there was some mutual, how is it, conciliation of the matter, that the factory management paid some money to the father of the girl, and she never came back to work after that night. But at Fairwear, we also run complaint helpline, so we received this complaint on the helpline where this girl herself made the complaint, and later the complainant called it off because there was conciliation between the management and the father of the complainant. Yeah, there was one more point. I don't know how am I doing time-wise. One more point I want to mention before I move to the next and the last topic is the way management looks at remediation of violence against women. And here there was a few months back, we received a complaint from Kolkata, a factory from Kolkata, where a worker in the embroidery section complained of eve teasing and molestation time and again from this one particular worker. When we raised it to the management, their first answer was, or the first reply was, oh, that's bad, and we will install a CCTV camera on the shop floor, and that should be taken care of. Now the point is, while CCTV camera will of course see who's doing what, the physical manifestation of a violence will be captured, but that would not solve the violence itself, or the mindset the mindset of people that women can be or will be the target of their violence. So instead of doing a training or sensitization lessons or classes with the management and basically with everyone on the shop floor, this management said that CCTV will take care of all of it. CCTV is only it's a very superficial way of managing a violence-prone workplace.
Ma'am,
And
you have 5 minutes.
Okay, right. Yeah, so even the management who are quite, otherwise very intelligent and smart, business-wise, they think, how to grow the business and everything. But when it comes to issues like this, they want a quick fix, which is not really going to address the reason why violence against women are taking place in the industry. Now, lastly, I would want to touch upon the prevention and the protection steps that are there in place, and its rather ineffectiveness in addressing the violence against women. I just shared the Kolkata example where violence against women is taken as it's taken like a machine which has broken, and then you quickly fix it. It's not like that. As I said in the beginning of my talk, that it is a structural problem. It has to be dealt with at that level, and very consistent training, sensitization of each one of us in the society is required to address violence against women if you want to stop it at work, at home, in the society, everywhere. There are laws in place in India. The Sexual Harassment Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013, which says that there should be an internal committee in every workplace employing more than 10 or more workers. Garment factories do have internal committees in place. If one visits, you'll see all the records and photographs of these committees, but unfortunately, it has not been able to address the violent behavior, the violence against women. It continues to carry on in the industry. It's also because the business or the management do not want to record. If they get a complaint, they do not want to put it on record that such a complaint came to them, because they think the brand who are their clients, they would consider this as a black mark, or we would get less points in terms of securing business when we have more complaints on record. So as far as possible, they try to tackle it off the record or informally. So that is one reason they do not want to put it on IC on the register. Second, women themselves are not empowered enough, and they do not have the support structure around them to come and file a complaint, even if they muster the courage to do so, because of lack of support around them. There's no organizing of workers. There's no union to support the workers, so they also do not come forward to record the complaint. But all of these, as I said, even the business one for them, making a record or keeping a record is more administrative job and not really something that they would want to do because they want to address violence at workplace. So they take it more as a burden, like one additional burden for them, administrative burden. And secondly, there's also lack of support system around women, which would help them to come to the committee and file the complaint. So while the laws are excellent, there's hardly any monitoring from any of the department, the State Department, of the implementation of the law. And therefore, the law has been reduced, at least in the garment industry, to mere paperwork, and filing for auditing purposes. So if they are audited and records are checked, they will have bi-monthly meetings and photographs of the meeting. But the number of complaints that come to these committees are very far and few, which is, I would say, it has been ineffective in the garment industry so far. With that, I'll end my talk here. I think I'm on time. Thank you very much. If there's any question, I'll be happy to take it after the next speaker speaks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Suhasini. I request Prerna to take over.
Hello, everyone. I am the second moderator for the day. I shall now be introducing our second speaker. Yes. Okay, so second speaker for the day is Ms. R. Geeta. Ms. R. Geeta, the All India Additional Secretary of the Nirmal Mazdoor Panchayat Sangam, NMPS, has been working with the workers from the unorganized sector since 1975, prior to which she worked with the organized sector. The NMPS, an important constituent of the National Campaign Committee for Central Legislation, NCCCL, for construction workers, is working towards the comprehensive protection and social security for construction workers. She also represents the Unorganized Workers Federation, UWF, which comprises of various independent organizations of unorganized workers in Tamil Nadu. The UWF has been working on issues related to child labor, bonded labor, migrant labor, the homeless, and others. Ms. Geeta also represents the Women's Struggle Committee and Center for Labor Education and Development. During the lockdown, NMPS, NCCCL, and UWF have been raising the issue of financial and food grain dal oil assistance through welfare boards for unorganized workers. We are extremely fortunate to have with us someone who has played such a crucial role in bringing the issues and concerns of the unorganized workers to the forefront. I would now invite Ms. R. Geeta to address the audience on the topic for today, which is gender-based violence and labor. Ms. Geeta? Hello.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are.
Yes. Good evening to all. I think it's a very important subject, that is the violence on women's labor, and that is a very concrete issue. What I have seen, not only with the bonded laborers, in many instances have gone through harrowing incidents of violence, sexual violence, and the women are the victims in not only economic exploitation, but also the sexual exploitation. So, and of course, beatings and physical attacks and so on, which we find in many instances among the bonded laborers, whether it is the stone quarry bonded laborers or the Irula tribal bonded laborers, and whether in North India or in South India. So I'm not going into that details now. Let me confine myself to our experience in the Women's Struggle Committee. In fact, the struggle committee was formed by Pennur Meyyakam only because there was an instance of sexual you can say harassment by village health nurses in Perambur district. Um, that was in 96. I think that is the year when the Vishaka case judgment was, brought out. And around that time, this incident took place. And the VHNs had a struggle at the local level and at the state level. But when they had a struggle at the local level, the victims were about 10 to 12 nurses who were told to unnecessarily, demonstrate a few things by opening up their clothes and so on. So then they protested and they had a demonstration, and they were, all transferred. While the doctor who did all that, there was no action on him. So they came to Chennai and they sought our help. So we thought, let us form a women's struggle committee in which there would be both trade unions, because VHNs were already in a union, and it's a strong state level union. So we formed a committee with the VHN union and Pennur Meyyakam being a convener, and various other organizations of unorganized workers, as well as the women's organizations. So it's like it was a combined thing of women's organizations and trade unions.
Sorry to interrupt, ma'am. Can you please turn on your camera if that's possible? We can't see you. Thank you.
Is it okay?
We still can't see you.
Okay. I found the icon.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Please continue.
So when that happened, then the combined strength was very much there. Then and we sent a petition to them. We requested them to come over, and Dr. Mohini Giri and Padma Seth, both of them came down and conducted an inquiry. And so that was also a very historic moment because the Vishaka judgment was out. So then, in fact, that spurred, I would say, the action on our part from the Women's Struggle Committee. And we had, we had to take the issue forward. The solution, had to be achieved. So when we went forward, so they came and did the inquiry, and meanwhile we had a huge demonstration. First, the VHNs were on hunger strike and indefinite hunger fast inside the Directorate of Medical Services compound. And then once the struggle committee was formed, then we had a human chain, and then we had a demonstration, all that. There was just one after the other. We were having different types of protests. And then around that time, the NCW intervened, and then I think after that, the NCW intervened and they came there and they, after the inquiry, they gave a report. And it was not only for the health department to have a complaints committee on sexual harassment, but also that the conduct rule, government conduct rule should also have provisions relating to sexual harassment in the workplace. So that also was one of the reasons for complaints committees in different departments, as well as punitive action on those who indulge in sexual harassment. So that was one other kind of thing. So, but the biggest problem was the government refused to take action on the doctor who actually did the sexual harassment. So then we had to, the association went to the High Court and filed a petition, all that. But we didn't see the light of the day. I think all that came, all that, because the incident happened before the conduct rule amendment. I think they made a big fuss and they refused to take action on the doctor. So that is the sum and substance of it. Let me not dwell on that anymore. Let me go to the next issue. So the next thing that we had, that came to us was the issue of the sanitary workers. One of the sanitary workers who was harassed very badly by the superiors. And I can tell you one thing about the women sanitary workers. They're being sexually harassed. They're being called by caste names. They're being, harassed constantly. Is not only an issue in Chennai. It's an issue all over the country. And I've heard the SC/ST Commission member from Delhi, saying that she apparently had worked with sanitary workers in Delhi, and the same situation is there. And there is also the situation of the whole thing of corruption. See, it's intertwined with corruption of the corruption at the at certain supervisory level in garbage removal. So this happens, I think, all over the country, even in Agra. I've heard about it in different cities. So the whole problem was that this lady, this woman superior who was a supervisor, that either she gives him certain amount of money from every month, or she would come in, or she must go and sleep in. See, that was the kind of a demand made out to her, and that was a very shocking thing for us. But it seems it goes on, and so the women do not want to undergo torture in the hands of the superiors, the supervisors. So they give the money. How much money? See, suppose they were at that time, they were all temporary sweepers. See, what I want to point out is the women who have a temporary or they are working on the contractual basis in the corporations or in the municipalities, they are always under threat of sexual harassment. So they, and then she was told, okay, and many other, all the women in that particular division, they were all told the same thing. Oh, either you give money, so everybody gives money. So she and few people, and of course everybody was relying on her because she is a slightly educated, 10th standard, I think even 12th standard, educated the lead and put up a protest. And then he said, at least get me some mobile phones, 1 or 2 mobile phones, buy and give it to me, this and that. So anyway, she refused all that. So then he put up this demand, and she found out through somebody or the other about the organization, and she came to Penurmekam and she gave the complaint. So then we again, the same situation. Corporation of Chennai had no complaints committee on sexual harassment, to which you can make a complaint. So then we had to, we once again wrote to NCW. There was a very, it was a different period. There was a lady called Nirmala from Bangalore. Anyway, a bank employee, I think. So she was bank officer, and she was quite open to doing something. So she came immediately. And the interesting thing about the inquiry was she went to the spot. But after telling the supervisor and the corporation that she was coming to the corporation headquarters, she didn't go to the headquarters. She went with us to the spot. So all those, that supervisor and everybody else were waiting in the corporation office while she was in the spot with us. And then she talked to all the people around, and the many of the public came to depose, and they said, see, he is the one who is harassing her and demanding money from all these people, so that so many of the streets are not clean because of the supervisor, because he demands money from them. And he says, you go home by 10 o'clock. If their duty is between 6 and 2, you go home by 10 o'clock and give me this much money. You can go and work elsewhere. Some other complicated way of extracting money. So that is the way it went on. So then, so all this got exposed in the whole thing. And then that he harasses them, sexual harassment is also part of it. The public entire public got to know about it even earlier. So I think the women also told them very openly, see, he's not letting us sweep the streets, nor is he clean the streets, nor is he letting us go. He wants us to, he's demanding that one should go and sleep with him, this, that, so all that. So they were very upset, and the public was also very, very upset and distressed. So in fact, what they in fact openly said, oh, they are driving towards privatization. So all this is so that the public will also get very annoyed with the corporation, and then the corporation has no other go but to give it on contract to some company, which will do the cleaning, street cleaning and garbage removal. So that is there is something, I think, very fishy about the whole thing, but so we had to deal with it. So she spoke to the public and all that, and then she came to the corporation office, and then this inquiry was there. And then later, she wrote her report, and then the complaints committee was constituted. Of course, she was, this man was thrown overboard, all that. So that is the that happened in her case, Amalevi's case. And then there was later also another sanitary workers case in which the complaints committee was very much there, and they took very good action on the supervisor, because it is not many women come forward to complain. That I think is a very important issue among the temporary workers and the contract labor. And I know of many other instances among the contract labor, which keeps happening in this sector, that is among the sanitary workers. So that is another second area I can talk about. And the third and the last, because I think we are reaching 4:20, and the third area of where there is a lot of sexual harassment, and that is domestic workers. So domestic workers, in fact, we had a very solid case about which we did some things, but not to our satisfaction, because it was a placement agency, through which the domestic workers are sent to work. And that man, Raghupati in Sairapet, he had been in the name of giving jobs to the, single women, widows and deserted women from rural areas, he would register them, and that was the first placement agency in Chennai, and probably Tamil Nadu, and that is a very long time back, 20 years back, more than 20, I think 25 years back. He started that agency and he had been doing that placement, and even with IAS officers and all that, big ministers and all that. But what happened was they cannot get the salary. The salary will be sent to him by in some fund or the other in joint names, his name and the lady's name. So that's how he would do it. And then he will give them monthly, they will come begging and he will give them 50 rupees, 100 rupees for their monthly expense, because they are all live-in workers. So they will get their food there. So you get your food, you get looked after. Why do you need money? He will ask them. So the money will not go to their this thing unless they really make a big demand. That is one thing. Second thing, he wanted one person every night, to come and sleep with him. So that is the way he was running the agency. And his wife, or nobody can do anything and nobody will do anything. So he was like a tyrant and a dictator, and he would, indulge in open sexual violence, So this is the way in which the Saidapet Center was operating. And then only when a friend of ours who joined the Pennurime Iyakkam, Jayalakshmi Amma, she went there to work for a while to help. She thought that this is an area where some work is going on with domestic workers, let me go and help. And as she was doing that work, she got to know about all this. And then she walked out with about 200 women. And then she came to us. And then she formed her own society. And she does a tremendous amount of work for the domestic workers and for their children's education, everything, many, many things she does. So a lot of philanthropic work, and in terms of also wages, salary, everything, she will make everybody open bank account so that they get their salary properly, this and that. That apart, she brought all these 200 women. And then this whole thing of non-payment of wages was one issue. And the other is the sexual violence. So the sexual violence, I remember there were 25 cases of rape. 25 cases of rape, which she brought. And we had given to the police. But they refused to register any case, not a single case. Because he gives domestic workers to everybody, all big, all these big wigs in the society. So who will come forward and register a case against him? Nobody will. So that is the main thing. So the other thing that happened was, then we had to again go to the National Commission for Women, and she came. One of the members came and did a proper inquiry, and then the issues came out, and I think only about, even then, only after all that, their recommendations, only 2 cases were registered. And they saw to it, the police saw to it, the worst victims, were made witnesses in these cases. The worst victims were made witnesses. That is really the bad situation. And the 2 victims, about whom the cases were filed, I think one case, one was SC/ST, while actually 25 cases, I think about 20 cases were SC/ST women. But they were all made witnesses, and one of them was only about verbal abuse, and only the verbal abuse case was filed as an FIR, and the court had sentenced him to 2 years of imprisonment. And then he filed an appeal, etc., etc. And then he came out. And unfortunately, he was being supported by another retired IAS from an SC community. So that was a pathetic situation, that the SC women had no support, and from their community. And ultimately, we had to push and push. Anyway, he passed away last year at the age of 85. So you can imagine how many women you would have raped, how many women you would have harassed, and how many workers' wages, how much of wages he has taken away. So this is the sorry state of affairs of the first placement agency in Chennai. So coming around, I mean, actually there are many cases of domestic workers, faced with sexual violence that happens. And not only that, there are also recently, I think 2 years back, there was this girl from Hyderabad who was, you can call it trafficking, or I would call it bondage. Her aunt had literally given her as a bonded labor, and then she was sexually exploited, 14-year-old child. So basically, it's a sexual exploitation of even children in domestic work goes on, unabated, absolutely no control, no, kind of lessening of cases. They come up when they die, or they come up when they really are able to find some contact and come out and make a complaint. Otherwise, these things keep happening. And that was one case. And of course, we could retrieve her and, file cases, but the cases never stood the light of the day. So only child labor case was there, and then she was put in a home and then, taken off by, and so there was another case, of course, that was an actor. What's her name? Balapriya. Yeah, that was last year when a child was taken as domestic worker. Actually, it's the same area in Andhra Pradesh that Balapriya comes from. So this girl was brought by the mother. Rather, she took advance and she let the girl to go and work. But then there was sexual, harassment, and also all kinds of things. So then the mother wanted to take her back, and she even held a press conference in Hyderabad, not Hyderabad, Vijayawada somewhere. And then she had, along with many NGOs, she had sought their help, and she held a press conference saying, after an FIR was registered in Andhra Pradesh. But getting the wind of it, this lady had the audacity to hold a press meet. This actor had a audacity to hold a press meet with the girl, and she accused the child of stealing money and various things, laptops and everything, which was all there in the press meet to be shown. And that as if she took it, and then she was, and then they brought the materials back, which was a total, the police station, Tinagar. Then cases were filed on her and her mother. And actually the next day the mother came thinking that since the FIR was filed, she could take the child back to her village. But what awaited her was, nothing but arrest. So she was arrested, put in jail. Then the child was sent to a child, a home, remand home. And then, different people, Father Bosco and Don Bosco group people, including one Father Anthony Sami, who was an advocate, he, defended her in the case, and also the child. And somehow they are out of the cases. But then the government has not, our Labour Department has not registered the case under the Bonded Labour Act. But the root cause of it was the sexual harassment and, of course, child labor, which is totally despicable. And this is happening even in a, somebody well known in society. They indulge in such things. So we have to see if we have to root it out. Of course, the government of India has brought a law quite a few years back, 7 years back, called the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. But the law provides for big workplaces, but for the unorganized sector, the only thing they have is district level complaints committees, which don't really, which are not known to people. They don't really go to them, and they are not even constituted in many districts. So this had been the situation. In fact, we have a very concrete demand from the Unorganized Workers Federation that compliance committees must be constituted in every one of the welfare boards. We have 17 welfare boards under the Labor Department, and we have 17 other welfare boards under various departments, fisheries, and for the Sapai Karamcharis in the TATCO, Adi Dravdar department, like that, different departments are there. So, are having welfare boards. So, why can't complaints committee on sexual harassment be constituted as part of the welfare board, so that the registered workers can go there and make a complaint? Because no woman worker really knows about the district complaints committee to be able to go there and file a complaint. And I don't know how many cases are registered there and functioning and so on. So I don't want to comment on that. So I would much rather say that apart from complaints committees on the floor level in the companies, factories, and also in the various departments and the organizations of the public sector and so on. Apart from that, it is very important that these complaints committees are constituted at the level of the welfare boards of unorganized workers, the building workers. Building workers, of course, we have had a very important case of rape and murder of
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am.
Yeah, I think they're coming
you have
to close. Okay.
5 minutes
Okay.
more. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So no, it's okay. I've come to the close. So this is the situation. So sexual harassment is part of the working condition. Is part and parcel of working condition of women labor in our country. So it is very important that these complaints committees are constituted, and even those, the Vishaka judgment talked about the posters to say what is sexual harassment, in terms of even the language used, in terms of showing the pictures, etc., etc. So these must also be in every workplace. So that is not there at all. So, and then thirdly, the training. So the provisions of the Act and the provisions of the Vishaka judgment have to be really followed in our state and in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now request Soumya to summarize and highlight the points from the previous speaker's talk, and following which I'll summarize Geeta ma'am's talk, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Thank you.
All right. So Ms. Suhasini has shed light on the workers in the garment industry, specifically focusing on the women workers in the garment industry. She spoke about the kinds of violence that are perpetuated in the society against women, which are both structural and interpersonal. She has also elaborated on how urban spaces are being designed very inadequately for women. So also Suhasini ma'am has spoken about the lack of initiatives taken in organizations to prevent sexual harassment. And even if complaints are being taken up, they are processed in a more informal manner, which could later, whose redressal mechanisms could be inadequate in the future. So also, such violence is you perpetuated knowingly or unknowingly by the government and the state. So these are some of the topics that ma'am has covered. And yes, so and also ma'am has talked about the internal complaints committee that are present in organizations to tackle sexual harassment cases, and how Fairwear as an organization also looks into taking up such cases. Thank you.
Yeah, moving on to Geeta ma'am's talk. Well, thank you for shedding light on some of the cases that you've had experience with that have been faced by the unorganized sector. So, ma'am highlighted how the importance of mobilization of women workers to organize movements, especially for those who come from the SC, ST, or marginalized communities. She also highlighted how the struggles of the temporary workers, especially those in working in the sanitation department, and how supervisors or those who are privileged and those in power easily take advantage of their vulnerability. She also highlighted how most of these cases do not come up because these women lack support, and they also lack information regarding the provisions that there are, or the guidelines there are regarding the provisions. And therefore, unless a life is lost, most of these cases don't come to the forefront. She also highlighted how there are different ways, like I mentioned earlier, as she said, in the case of the supervisor with the sanitation workers, or even the actor, um, it's very easy for privileged people and those in power to take advantage um, of those coming from marginalized communities, exploiting them. And it's not just limited to physical violence, sexual violence. It also includes keeping the salary from them, asking for sexual favors, etc. And they find themselves in a very sorry state, or they find themselves not in a position to ask for help, primarily because they don't know where to go. And even the government, despite providing committees and provisions, is not executing them well because of the corruption that exists. So that's about the second speaker, and we open the floor for questions. So you may unmute yourself and ask questions to the speakers. All right. So I have a question for Geeta ma'am regarding the condition of live-in workers, especially in the lockdown scenario. So there's a possibility that they were at a greater risk for abuse, since they would not have means to go back to their hometowns, or they would have been pressurized to stay back and continue living with their employers. So have you encountered any of these cases in the past few months regarding violence of live-in workers?
I really don't know whether there have been incidents of violence. There have been incidents of of domestic violence which had come to us, but not violence faced by live-in workers. In fact, the other domestic workers, the temporary, I mean, the people who go and work in 3 to 4 houses, they were all stopped from work, and they were all stopped, and they were told because they are, and then they said, oh, you cannot come because you will come into the flats with corona. In fact, many of the apartment association, residents association, took a stand that there should be no workers, so no domestic workers. That was the stand taken by the employers, to my knowledge, because they were so scared of the women contracting COVID. And also, they would not be allowed to go out and buy vegetables and all that, even for the living workers were not. And I think many of the living workers were also sent back. To my knowledge, they were sent back. And they were not allowed to work. That is the main complaint among the domestic workers, that they were not allowed to work. Just like, and which also meant many employers did not pay them any money. Maybe some of them had paid half wage, some of them had paid some wages, but many of the employers did not bother to give them any money, which means that they were left high and dry. So that is the uh, main thing about the domestic workers is their indebtedness during the COVID-19 period. So they were so indebted that there have been many cases of suicide in Tamil Nadu. So because of the debt trap they were into. So it's a very pathetic situation, but I haven't heard of
Ma'am, we can't hear you. I think there's an internet connection problem.
of violence inside the home. I mean, of domestic workers. Domestic violence had probably increased. That's what everybody was. Incidents of domestic violence had taken place. Yeah, I agree.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
See, on the textiles, I want to make a comment. See, in Tamil Nadu, there had been
Ma'am, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, I think she lost the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And, there is a person who's ready to ask doubt.
Yeah, sure. If there's any question, please go ahead. Suhasini ma'am, do you have anything to say regarding the question that I had?
On the, I mean, you asked question on the live-in harassment of the live-in workers.
Yeah.
I mean, in my reference, I would say, I mean, I would take it to workers living in hostels, and within in the factory premise. And of course, it's corona or no corona. These workers are basically confined in these hostels and are at the they work at the behest of the owners. Sometimes they also work 2 shifts in a row, which is 16 hours without rest. Um, and and again, they're also, because it is in the hostel and they are not allowed to socialize, meet outside. They are also often prey to yeah, of these gender-based violence, primarily, so rapes and sexual favors, not allowing leave, and if they want to go on leave, then again some very very barbaric practices within the hostels that take place, and which outside the civil society or even the civil society hardly get to know. We get to know sometimes because everything is dealt with within the premise, and no outsider is privy to what goes inside the factory and the hostels. And often when and if there is a death, I mean, often it's a suicide that worker, like a young worker, commits because of constant harassment and violence. And it is often portrayed as suicide because of some love affair that the girl had and unable to meet the boy, or some family trouble because of which the girl took the life. So there's been a study by one of our partner in Satyamangalam called Reed, and they have documented like 140 suicide in the last 3 to 4 years, only in the spinning mills, which is a very high number. Uh, Only, I mean, given, and in 3 districts of Tamil Nadu, where all these spinning mills are prevalent. Um, and often, and in most of these cases, the management has said that it is because of a love affair that the girl had or some family issue, and not saying. I mean, and we all are only basically we are left to guess or have some information through their friends or what's going on in the hostel and why the life was taken, why the person committed suicide. But it's a very sad state of affair within the hostels in spinning mills.
Uh, okay, ma'am. So I have a question for you. So often, what I mean, the kind of complaints that we get through ICC in organizations mostly have to do with sexual harassment. But we can't ignore any kind of emotional abuse or harassment that also takes place in such workplaces, which could be slurs that could be very mean. Uh, so how important are these concerns of workers for an organization, and how are these addressed?
Right. So for an organization like ours, it is very important and very serious because these things are an ongoing thing. It doesn't happen one-off like accidents or rapes, or these are one-off incidents, which is very big and very unfortunate. Um, but these comments and molestation or yeah, slurry remarks, these are ongoing to every worker, more or less every worker. Um, and therefore, I mean, it's also very difficult to say which is of a higher uh, intensity, or this is smaller violence and this is higher violence. We cannot say that because something is happening over the time and something is happening only once a year. I don't know. I don't want to give that timeline to it. But you cannot say this violence is smaller and therefore okay, and the other one is big and therefore not okay. The primary or the basis is that a workplace should be safe for any worker to come and work, and where they and a worker look forward to go to the workplace, and they feel protected as well. So it's not just the co-worker that are treating them well, treating each other well, but also the management who's there to see that nothing untoward happens inside the factory. So it is really important for us to see that workplaces are important, and therefore we do. I mentioned that Fairwear also does factory trainings. In fact, in factory trainings, we train not only the workers about sensitizing what is violence and what you should do when you're harassed, but we also train middle management and top management on, again, sensitizing them, not that they don't know, but to bring the subject in the fore yet again, and also have mechanisms in place in workplaces where workers can come and file their complaints. But it also boils down to the intention of the management to really percolate this message down to the staff time and again. We may come for training once a year or once in 2 year, 3 year, but it's the intent of the management that matters on how effective the systems are in the workplace.
Thank you, ma'am. Samreen has a question. You can go ahead, Samreen.
Yeah. Can I? This is Manimeklai.
Okay, yeah, Manimi.
Uh, Yeah, this is to Suhasini. How about this? During the COVID, the migrant workers are left for their own natives, and some of them who are here only employed, and that too half wage only paid. So we have also been part of the discussions that we conducted. So what is the experience of Fairwear? Did you intervene there to make the workers to get full wage, or how about the migrant workers? Are they back or still not coming back?
Right. Thank you for your question. So the issue of migrant worker was really very pronounced during the COVID times. One, that the workplaces were suddenly asked to stop functioning. I mean, all workplaces were closed. The transport was closed. So migrant workers who were staying in rented places, if there's no livelihood, if there's no place of work to go and therefore no income, there's no point in staying at that place. So they also wanted to go back to their villages, towns, wherever. But in this whole thing, there was no transport either, because there was complete lockdown. And so they were basically stranded in places of work with no work, and the tenant asking them to leave the place. So their situation of migrant workers are very deplorable, I would say. During the lockdown, what we through our partner, I mean local NGOs, we did help in registration of the migrant workers, because often if there's no registration, you also see, I mean, the way systems work in India, if there's no registration, no document, then you cannot avail the facilities that the government is announcing, the schemes and the half payment and all that. And often in the industry, if they are not permanent workers, they are working under subcontractual agencies. Then there's no record, and it's then again left to the contractor to make the payment to these contractual workers or not. So it was very difficult to track these migrant workers down, have them registered, submitted to the district collector, and then to have these basic needs, often these rations that were given to the workers, and also arrange for the transportation back home. So the special trains this whole advocacy that work that went on. Payment of wages was an issue. Not all the employers, not all factories made the payment to workers, even the half payment. And then sometime in June, I think 12th June, the government order was also taken back, or rather challenged, and then therefore taken back, where businesses argued that if we do not have work, you as in the government cannot ask the business to pay wages. So this order of the government was taken back, and therefore we, even as someone who believes that workers should be paid even if there's no work, because this was a very special case, we could not really, there was no mandate for the suppliers, for the factories to pay the wage. So we could not really push for this payment of wages unless it is on the human ground. So it was left to the employers, good practices, or a benevolent employer would pay and others would not. So it was left to that. It was quite, not so happy times for those workers I would say rather very bad times. Stranded, no income, based and living off charity, and basically at the mercy of employer. If they pay the wages, then they would go have something to buy, otherwise not.
Samreen, you may ask your.
Yes.
Before that, I just wanted to add that Geeta ma'am is back. So in case you all have questions for her, you all can also ask. Yeah, Samreen can go ahead.
So, hello everyone. This is Samreen from Loyola College, Chennai. Firstly, I would like to put forth that I'm fortunate enough to be present in such a space where we can understand the possibilities and changes when it comes to gender-based violence and labor. So my question is for Suhasini ma'am. So ma'am, as you rightly pointed out on how there is a more ratio of women in marginal levels under huge capitalizing industries. So ma'am, my question would be, what are the possible measures that should be regulated by the industry as well as the state in order to break the existing glass ceiling, which is very much prevalent in an professional environment?
Right. Yeah, so it is not just in the garment industry that you see women grow only up to a certain level and not beyond. And you rightly put the glass ceiling, the term glass ceiling there. I think one of the best way to change the practices, the prevalent practices, is one by policy, um, either at the government level or at the employer level or at the business association level. So we have to work at all the levels. And if we talk about the policy level, I mean, if you ask me for a wish list, I would say that in any industry, especially where the women workers are dominant in the lowest rung, in the lowest strata, at least 50% of 50% of women should be supervisors, or I mean, just above them, and have some quota at every level of the management. What we have now is that there should be, I don't remember the percentage, but a certain percentage of women in the boards of the company, which is also which is fulfilled, of course, but you often see the daughter or the wife of the promoter of the company as one of the nominee, as one of the board member, which doesn't serve the purpose. I mean, the idea should be that women, not the relative, but other women, and there are many promising women in the corporate world or in the working class, who should be given up space in the board and in basically in every management strata, starting from the supervisory level. So that would be my wish list for at the policy level, and it can come from the management, also from the association, and best if it is coming from the state.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Arisi, you may ask your next question.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for both speakers, Geeta ma'am and Suhasini. Now, I would like to ask, as we have been researching on labor for a longer time now, and on the one side, civil society activism is going on, NGOs are working on the field level. On the other hand, the government is bringing up policy and schemes and laws, and all together we try to negotiate all these intersectional spaces to address the question of labor empowerment, labor rights. Now, particularly, both speakers have brought up a very important question, a very important point, that sexual violence against women in the workspace, and particularly against the vulnerable sections, particularly lower strata of workers. Now, how are we going to address, on the one hand, we have legal framework to address these questions, and we have organizations working on it. How are we going to negotiate apart from this legal framework, and apart from having NGOs working on, civil society working on the socio-cultural spaces, to change the notion of objectifying the women's body? How are we going to negotiate that? Unless that space is addressed, how this simultaneous action could not take place. Over the researches, we have been reading lots of papers and researches, all those researchers concentrating on at least one or the other way, individual sectors and the workspace violence, and how it is addressed, rather than comprehending the two space negotiations, dialectic mechanism, how it operates on the social space and how it reflects on the workspace. How are we going to address this? Could be answered by both speakers. Maybe I would welcome it. Thanks.
Geeta, will you want to go first on this?
Ma'am, please unmute. We cannot hear you. Geeta ma'am, please unmute.
Hello?
Yeah. Well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah. So I'm head of the Center for Women's Studies in the University of Hyderabad.
One second.
Sure.
Could you ask your question once the previous one is answered?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just saw
No
the
issues.
message and then I just...
Yeah, no issues. Yes, Geeta ma'am, you can go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself. bottom left-hand corner. There'll be a mic.
We can't hear you, ma'am. Bottom left, there is a mute, there is a mic button. Click on that mic button and your mic will start working. Yeah, bottom left. First button, bottom left.
Can the host unmute her?
Yeah, we are not able to unmute. Maybe you can answer the question and we'll get that fixed. We'll let her. We'll get her on the phone. You can start answering the question.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. I don't remember now who asked me the question, but it was a good question. It is a good question, rather. So the two spaces you spoke about, socio-cultural space and the workplace, and how, of course, I mean, it cannot be separated. We are what we are as a person in the society is what we reflect in the workplace as well. So you cannot expect two different behaviors from me. I mean, to some extent different, but not entirely different. I may be more suave and more formal in workplace, and I'll be more relaxed in my home space or society, where I have known people around. But my personality will be the same. So it's futile to separate the two spaces when we talk about harassment or violence. We reflect, we show the same, manifest the same behavior in both the places. However, there are laws which regulate for example, domestic violence. There's a law to address it. And similarly, there is dowry. Since 2013, we also have an act, but earlier the Vishaka guideline that Geeta often referred to, very strong guidelines on sexual harassment, addressing sexual harassment at workplace, preventing, redressing, and prohibition of the harassment. Now, I think the change will come only when, because the precursor is that gender-based violence is structural. So it's not a one-off episode that happens. It is ingrained, it is inherent, not inherent, it is ingrained, or socialization, because of socialization of human being. And since childhood, we are taught as women and as boys to behave certain ways, to have certain roles in the house, to do certain things outside. So there's a whole conditioning that happens and with which we grow up. Now, unless we break that kind of conditioning, the stereotyping of men and women, it's not going to, the harassment is not going to change. And the harassment also takes place because women are women are considered to be a second rung citizen, like second to men. I would say second rung citizen is not the right word, but second to men. And therefore they think it is okay to abuse them or to just pass a remark and be fine. And even women are taught, to take it with a pinch of salt, that this is part of the job, and if you are going out of home, you have to face it, like you like it or not. So this is something that we also, as women, we accept it to a certain degree. We do accept it, and men are also, taught, or they learn over the time that it's okay to just abuse or comment on a girl passing by or anything. So unless we change the socialization of a child, and I'm saying child because only when they grow up, the changes will happen. And with the adults like us, the constant training, constant reminder of the fact that we are equal, you should treat each other with respect. And I'm not taking one gender, only women should be treated respectfully, even for men. So this constant reminder, different trainings, workshops, messages, posters, everything should be there. And also time and again, wherever there's things going wrong, you have to object it right then and there, and not react to it after things have happened. Well, depending on the cases where you can object right there. unless these things happen, I think it's difficult to say that change will come with one research study or one workplace changing, or yeah. So it is because it is so interlinked, these workplaces and socio-cultural spaces. No number of policies and laws will change the behavior of people, and it has to come from the socialization process that since childhood, when we are all raising our children or interacting with our children as well. To that, I would like to, I want to share, if time allows, I want to share an example where I have a son who's now 10-year-old, but when he was 6 or 7-year-old, he was crying on something. And a friend of mine who happened to be at that point in my home, he himself a very educated person, a man of 50, 55, I would say. He said, "Why are you crying like a girl?" Now, if you start associating crying as a bad thing to do, and such bad things are only done by girls, then that little child will register that crying is bad, and therefore I should be rough and tough because I'm a boy and I should not cry like a girl. While crying is an emotion which any human being will have, or should have rather. So, and I objected to his remark right there that this is also stereotyping certain behaviors to only that girls will do, or certain things that only boys will do. There's no reference to violence here, but I'm saying how we raise our children, and certain remarks, it plays and registers in the brain of the growing child, and therefore they grow up with certain things that they should be doing and they should not be doing. Now, in an educated society like ours, or at least all of us, I think we mingle with people who have a certain level of knowledge and understanding. Even in such societies, things or remarks are made which are not appropriate, gender appropriate, and which further the stereotyping of men and women or boys and girls. And therefore, the reason if you kind of extrapolate it, the violence is also a manifestation of just this stereotyping. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhasini, for the answer. But precisely what you have said is very right. I precisely asked the same question, that are we failing to address this question in the social cultural spaces, which actually intensifies the workspace violence, again. I think in the space of NGOs working in and civil society activism happens, I think there is a gap in the social cultural space. That is what precisely I was asking you. The dialectical connections
there is a
between,
gap.
yes,
Indeed, and it wouldn't. Just by addressing that gap will also not result in the change. It has to be done at all level, all the time, because we don't have it in our mind all the time.
That dialectical thing has to happen simultaneously to create the change. I think that has to be researched further, or that has to be, as an academician, I reflect on the research, but actually the field change has to come. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Geeta ma'am, would you like to respond to the same question?
See, on the social cultural level, before that, I want to make a comment on, there was another question from a Loyola student about the, what do you call it? The upgradation of women, which is very, very important, I think. See, the same thing happened with the women sanitary workers. Our demand has been that the supervisors, there must be a definite percentage of women. And in fact, the case that we had taken up of Brahma Devi, she in fact became a supervisor. She has become a supervisor, and she's almost like a model. She's so good too in terms of her work, and also in terms of her, relationship with the women there and all that. So it is very important that women do become supervisors and women do become, of course, the question of management, I think that though it is very much part of our constitution, that the directive principles of state policy talks about workers' participation in management. There's no such thing, ever. In fact, we are in a regressive mode where even the, foreign capital is taking over, and the trains from public sector we are moving, the trains are being given to private sector. In the railway stations, about 300 railway stations are going to be given to private sector and so on. So anyway, so we are in a regressive mode, the economy. So I don't know to what extent this kind of workers' participation in management, and definitely there should be a what do you call proportional representation. That is what I would talk about, because the proportional, what is, if the sanitary workers are 100% women or 95% women, the 95% should be, even at the supervisory level, it should be women. So it must be reflected also in the management, even if it is private sector and so on. So anyway, so from there, I think it is very important. The social cultural aspects, I think, are the most important thing. And today, so in fact, we are trying to grapple with a case of sexual violence, on a
I think ma'am has an internet connection problem. So she's left the meeting.
So I think Miss Sheila can ask her question. Miss Sheila?
Yes, thank you. I'm the head of Center for Women's Studies in University of Hyderabad. Very interesting talk, Suhasini, really enjoyed it. Actually, I did a study sometime in 98 in NEPZ in Delhi, and there were a lot of factories inside. We were not allowed to go in. We were only interviewing women from the household level, and we could see that there was a lot of, they were just allowed to go and work, but there was no improvement in their house situation. The structural inequalities remained. But the comment I have to make now at this juncture is I did a lot of work on surrogacy, commercial surrogacy in India. And there's one particular researcher who was academic who has worked in Bangalore. And the exploitation in surrogacy is justified by saying that the exploitation in the garment factory is so bad that women are slightly better off in surrogacy. But then the surrogacy exploitation is a completely different kind of exploitation. Similar kind in a way, it is a bodily, they have to completely sign off their entire body for that entire pregnancy process and the IVF and everything and so on. So my only concern is, and that's how my work is really linked with your work at this stage, is how the structural inequalities and the objectification actually becomes a network of one job being better exploitation or a better level of exploitation than the other, and how then women get into this linked process of okay, not this kind of exploitation, but that kind of exploitation, and then these are justified based on it's finally it is all objectification. And so I just wanted to know if you have anything to say, or it's just my observation.
Unmute yourself, Suhasini.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I haven't studied commercial surrogacy, so I cannot comment on the gravity of the problem. But I do know of cases where garment workers have voluntarily taken up surrogacy for a big, good amount, I would say. Also because they are any working class person is in need of money often, especially when the regular livelihood that they are into provide only a subsistence wage. So any big wedding or death in the family or accident or sickness in the family puts them in debt, and to come out of it is so difficult that only a big amount at one point will save them or bring them out of the debt cycle. And that is where a few cases that I know of they have taken up surrogacy for, I remember at that time, good like 10 years back, some 5 lakh rupees for this whole term. However, it's also very interesting, as you put it, the way you put it, that the level of harassment in garment industry is so bad that anything else is better off, or it's okay that if I take surrogacy, even if it means that I have to surrender my body for 9 months for someone else. And it is to some degree, it is also true that the industry is very it's sapping one. Because this work, the monotonous work every day, like almost, if you put all the hours together, 10 hours on an average every day, without rest, without enough break, without even enough toilet breaks. And on top of that is the harassment and the violence that they face. So it's like every day of constant harassment, nagging, violence, sexual harassment too, and less wage, so all this put together, and then less wage. And therefore, I would not say that surrogacy is a better option, but it's always or often the case of grass is greener on the other side. And because I've not studied surrogacy, I cannot say what are the pluses and the minuses there. And I think it is okay to, at least I'll be out of debt by the end of 9 months or 10 months, whenever this whole, I don't know what the contractual period is for surrogacy. It's also, what I didn't mention in my talk is workers, especially women working in the garment industry, are seen in a bad light by the society, by the neighborhood, people in the neighborhood where they live. They're often considered to be women or girls of loose character. If they are easily approachable, is what I'm saying, the mindset of the people around. I've also heard that young girls who get into the garment industry, their marriage prospects becomes very difficult, because no man of character, quote unquote, will be willing to take a garment worker as a wife, because of this whole nature of the industry. They are harassed, they kind of they keep going out and sleeping with other men or managers and supervisors, these kind of things. So which is very prevalent in the industry. I'm not saying the industry is bad, but the practices are bad, and nothing is being done to stop it, or very little is being done with very little effect. These kind of practices that are going on. And then people, of course, given the society we love to talk and gossip. And if we want one small incident, and then everything is woven around it, and the character of the woman is demolished right then and there. So it's a mixture of who we are as a society, and the things that go on in the garment factory, which I agree with you. It's not a great place of work one would want to be in.
Geeta ma'am, so would you like to comment?
No, I would like to go back to where I stopped. See, basically, when we look at the entire scenario, not just women in the workplace, but also women at home. And at home, what I mean is not just the domestic violence, but also the area, the slum areas where women used to be very safe. Because slum areas is where women were very safe, and even the middle class women who would pass through slum areas would feel, that is a safe place. Women will come forward, save them from any violence if anything happens to them. That is the way people would think normally in Chennai earlier. But now within the slum itself, with the drugs, drug peddlers, with the liquor, mafia, that violence on young girls is also increasing. So if you look at the entire question of violence on women, sexual violence on women, whether it is in slum area or workplaces, I think the important question is how women are looked at, as objects of desire or whatever, a sex object. So this I think demolition of that is the priority. And that can only happen. I mean, I think one of the things that everybody should raise is the question of value-based education from the first standard to the highest level, which would include also, the no to casteism, no to caste, and no to, kind of this kind of religious bigotry and this kind of, what do you call, attacks on the minorities and the attacks on the Dalits and the attacks on women. So all these, kind of things, it is very important, not just a campaign outside that we are able to do, but it is also that in the education system, there is a need for value-based education from the lowest level to the highest level, which must also include an aspect of health education, about drugs, liquor, and so on. Because I think the boys as well as girls must be, aware of all the, health hazards, caused by, which are, caused by these kinds of drugs. And though the government is supposed to have a national policy on drugs, it only talks about a certain level of education at the level of 10 to 12, as if they only consume drugs. Because the entire city of Chennai, all the corporation schools, you have drugs. And, and you have drug chocolates sold near the schools. I don't know about other cities. But and in fact, the National Alliance of People's Movements, we had a yatra from Kanyakumari to Bhopal against drugs, because see, Madhya Pradesh is supposed to have children, 25% of children being addicted to drugs. So it's a very pathetic situation. The incident that I talked about is basically a ganja. With ganja, the way this girl was treated and the way the girl was attacked, and it's gruesome, absolutely gruesome. And there is a, I think there is some, of course, domestic violence. We know this liquor and domestic violence, they are very intimately linked, and so we need to, I think, combine it. So the caste is also connected with sexual violence, because the Dalit women, the way they are attacked, it's also to do with the caste and the that they are women. So it's I think the value-based education is a very important issue. It can happen through the education system. It has to happen outside also. So this is the kind of thing that we have decided, when we had a meeting recently, a Zoom meeting, a Google meeting on this, on the violence on women. That is what we decided for a 5-point program. And one of the demands was this. And that we would also campaign before this election, because we have a state level election in April. So one of the demands that we would put forward to the political parties would be on this. So how do you handle this increasing violence on women? So this is the important, as Suhasini also talked about, the violence, very, very omnipresent, I must say, in the Sumangali scheme. All those young girls who come to work in the spinning mills, in the various factories, and the entire thing, the government itself is now changing laws to say from 8 hours they're going to make it 12 hours. So it is nothing but bonded labor. It's another kind of bondage that the Indian working class is being led into. So we are reaching that kind of bonded labor state where, of course, sexual exploitation is part of bonded labor. That is that's the real fact.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that answer. Well, since we're running short on time, we cannot have any more questions. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Ms. Suhasini and Ms. Geeta for shedding light on not just the problems that are there in this area, but also for telling us what the possible solutions could be. Thank you to all the participants here. I'm sure all of us have learned a lot today, and we're extremely fortunate that we could be part of this session. So thank you so much once again, Ms. Suhasini and Ms. Geeta.
Thank you. Pleasure.
I now hand over it to HRF.
Thank you everyone. Good evening everyone. Once again, this is Saravanan. On behalf of HRF, I am very hearty gratitude to all the speakers for sharing their graceful words with us in this session. And I would like to thank moderators from BOM College. They have moderated the session very well. And I would like to thank all the participants for joining over here and attend the session. Hope this session would be very useful and informative. And before we close the session, as everyone know, this campaign session will continue for another 13 days because this is a 16 days campaign. So I'd like to invite all of you for tomorrow's session. We have a session on tomorrow. The topic is Administration of Justice and Women at the same time at 3:30 p.m. So once again, on behalf of HRF, I thank you all the participants, all the speakers, as well as moderators. And thanks to sign language interpreter as well as interpreter. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.